Welcome back to the Ghost Bunny Podcast. I'm your host, Bridget Marcourt, with a brand new episode for you guys. My guest today is Al Ridenour. Al Ridenour is an author specializing in European folk celebrations and their history. His most recent book on the topic, A Season of Madness, Fools, Monsters, and Marvels of the Old World Carnival, has been praised as intellectually hefty and for its clarity, eloquence, and wry humor. Since 2018, he has written and produced the podcast Bone and Sickle, exploring dark folklore and history through historical texts dramatized via sound effects and music. Ridenour is the author of the only English language book on Krampus history and folklore, The Krampus and the Old Dark Christmas. He has lectured on the Krampus and related winter traditions at the International Goethe Institute, the San Diego Art Institute, New American Museum, Tucson Museum of Modern Art, the Bowers Museum, and in the UK at London's Last Thursday Society and Whitby's Winter's Ghosts. In 2013, as co-founder of Krampus Los Angeles, Ridenour gathered a troupe of Krampus performers, crafted suits, and went on to organize an ongoing series of parades and themed shows known as LA Krampus Fest. In 2014, Ridenour's group hosted the first Europeans visitors to appear stateside in traditional costumes. And in 2015, they hosted an entire 15-person troupe from the state of Salzburg. He has also directed productions of a traditional 19th century Austrian St. Nicholas Krampus play from a script of his own translation, and has exhibited his handcrafted suits at the University of Southern California's Doheny Museum. As a journalist, he has contributed articles to the Los Angeles Times, LA Weekly, 14 Times, Maxim, Stuff, Savor, and other periodicals, as well as websites Boing Boing, Laughing Squid, Atlas Obscura, Folklore Thursday, Morbid Anatomy, among others. In 2000, he wrote his first book, Offbeat Food, Adventures in an Omnivorous World, which is an exhaustive survey of culinary oddities and culture, which Publishers Weekly described as a rollicking and at times mind-boggling crash course on exotic or weird foods. Ridenour also contributed chapters on underground cultural activities to Tales of the San Francisco Cacophony Society. From 1991 to 1999, he served as grand instigator of the Los Angeles Lodge of the Cacophony Society, a national network of art provocateurs and urban explorers responsible for founding the Burning Man Festival and serving as prototype for Project Mayhem in Chuck Palahniuk's Fight Club. He was the lead designer for a 2012 retrospective on the Cacophony Society at Grand Central Art Center in Santa Ana, California, and contributed materials to the 2014 exposition on Bo's Clowns, Evil Clowns in Germany. He is interviewed at length in the books This is Burning Man, The Rise of a New American Underground, Pranks 2, The Halloween Nation, Behind the Scenes of the American Fright Night. Ridenour studied animation at the University of California, Los Angeles, and German literature and philosophy at the University of Indiana in Bloomington. He graduated with honors. He has traveled to 21 countries and now lives in Pasadena, California, with artist and art school director-teacher Lauren. He speaks German well, Italian poorly, and attempts Latin translations with floundering enthusiasm. And I'm so excited to talk to him today all about Krampus and spooky Christmas traditions. Thank you so much for doing the show today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yes. So, first of all, I just wanted to comment on your backdrop because it looks amazing.
That's my world. Welcome to it.
What all is back there? I see a skull looking back at me. Oh my gosh.
There's at least one skull. Part of the reason I got interested in the Krampus is I am an artist and like to make things. So I was drawn to the idea of making the costumes and the masks and everything. And this is it's actually not too much stuff I made except the whole assemblage I put together. But I backed away from that a little and now do a podcast and write. But because otherwise your house fills up like that was a window. That was my front window at one point.
Well, I'm disappointed in myself because I have a pair of Krampus horns and I decorated them like with flowers and like cool stuff. And I went to like a Krampus tea party a couple of years ago and it never even occurred to me to go get them out of storage and wear them for this episode. And I should have done that 100%.
I should have brought up a Krampus mask or two, but they're kind of on permanent loan to our troop members. So I guess I have one in the basement, but failed to bring that up. So you'll have to imagine.
Well, I love any opportunity to dress up, so I'm like kicking myself for not. I'm going to blame it on the cold that I have. I'm getting over a cold, and so I feel like I just didn't have the energy, and I'm on like the cold medicine and that kind of stuff. So I'm going to blame it on that because I'm definitely a girl who like looks for any opportunity to dress up and wear those. So the reason that I got to know who you are is because Elsie Lottie. Um, are you how familiar are you with Elsie?
Uh, she listens to my podcast Bone and Sickle, I think, and she likes your show and my show, and I think she was trying to organize something up north in California somewhere, but I guess it didn't come through this year.
Yeah, so she was like, "I have this idea," 'cause she does an event each year called Gold Counting Paracon, and she asked me to do that next year in 2026, and I told her I would, and then I went to her house. She has a house that has some paranormal activity in it, so I went and checked out her house and did my podcast about it, and then she was like, "I have this idea of doing, like, a Christmas with, like, spooky stories event," and I absolutely love that idea. I've been trying to find ways and every year on my podcast I do it where I try and tell like Victorian ghost stories or try and bring that tradition back a little bit, kind of the
We do
spooky
too.
side.
We do too. It's
Yeah,
America's catching on.
yeah, slowly, very slowly. So a lot of people are still like, "Wait, what are you doing?" And so she was like, "I would love to do like this kind of like sleepover party with like scary stories and like Krampus and that kind of stuff." And I was like, "Yes, let's do it." But there were two dates at the hotel that she was working with could do it, and I was like, neither one of those dates are good dates because one was like Thanksgiving weekend,
Right.
and then the next one was like the like Saturday or Sunday before Christmas or something like that. And I was like, those are terrible though, because it's like the busiest time. Everybody's busy with their family on those exact dates.
I always forget I'm in the thick of because I do organize Krampus events in Los Angeles here, and I always forget that because we try to do them at the beginning of the month, which is the actual traditional date. So I always come out of Halloween, which is a big month for us, or my show
Yes.
and so forth. And then I think I have, oh, well, November is down, but then it's just a mad rush into the first week of December. And then you have the holiday, Thanksgiving in there. So it's very much one long, fun, crazy season.
Agreed. But I think if we like plan for next year, we could probably fit it in
Yeah.
now. Like we just have to plan earlier.
Yeah, I
But it's
hope
a
so.
great idea.
Yeah, I hope
Okay, so I think we should back up a little bit and tell people what Krampus is because I was getting a facial yesterday and I was talking about this podcast and I was so excited. I was going to be like talking about Krampus and everything. And she was like, "What the heck is Krampus?"
Well, the first thing people need to do the film that came out in I think 2015 or something like that. The Michael Dougherty, I think the Krampus film helped with name recognition, but could definitely confuse people as to what he is. But I don't have to. When I tell people about Krampus, they at least think they know what he is. And so the creature, the thing in that film was very misleading. I have a story about that because I'm here in Los Angeles too, and they reached out to me and it was strange. But my I guess I should. So my book looks at the actual tradition, the historical roots, and the traditional areas where where it's practiced. It's a tradition of Alpine Germany, so in southern Germany and in Austria, in the west of Austria mainly. It's spread beyond that, and now it's like, well, now it's in America and England and all over Europe actually. But traditionally, it's in those Alpine regions, and it takes place on St. Nicholas Day, which is the eve of St. Nicholas Day. St. Nicholas is December 6th. So in that sense, it's not really a Christmas tradition. So the 5th and the 6th are the days for the Krampus to come. And he's kind of plays the role he's sort of the bad cop to the good cop, St. Nicholas. So St. Nicholas's role, we haven't kind of left over our idea of Santa Claus, at least in as much as that's followed now. I don't really know that, Nick, our Santa Claus used, my dog. Oh no, the mailman came.
Uh-oh, the dreaded mailman.
Dagmar. Oh, my dogs have German names. So we have a little sort of artifact vestige of that left with our Santa Claus asking the kids if they've been good that year. So that's the same thing that Saint Nicholas does. Now, when I talk about Saint Nicholas in conjunction in relationship to Krampus, you have to remember these are Catholic regions, and he's represented as a saint. He's represented as kind of Nicholas historically was a bishop in Asia Minor actually, but in the middle from the Middle Ages on, they thought of him as sort of more European. But he's dressed as a bishop, so nothing resembling Santa Claus. But he does come. So originally, he would come to houses. A friend of the family, an uncle or something, would dress up as Nicholas and come to the houses. And of course, he knew the kids, but he'd have the white whiskers and the cap and the wig and everything. So it was a little hard to recognize. Maybe the kids knew, maybe they didn't. And he would play the role of the saint just appearing at the door and ask the parents how they'd behave and ask them how they'd behave. And then as this sort of, as a warning to them, if they didn't behave, the Krampuses would charge out. And the idea that the Krampuses would beat the kids, it's not that wasn't really part of it. The Krampuses would attack older kids because there's sort of a transit. There's a age where you grow into the role of playing Krampus, and that's like when you're in your late teens. So the little kids didn't really get hit. They'd be scared. But the older kids would be attacked because that's what they wanted. That they're older kids, and they want to prove their mettle and, take the plunge, take the challenge. So anyway, so Nicholas would come in. And there was actually a little ritual that they would do, or a little exercise. Nicholas traditionally would ask them if they'd memorized their catechism verses or had some Bible verse or song. More recently in more secular Europe, they asked them to sing a little song, or they might get their flute out and do a little solo. And it's just sort of a test to the kids to see if they've been, doing what the parents want nowadays. It's less religious, so these areas still are very religious. So they do a little test. Then Nicholas gives them some treats, and then comes the warning: if you aren't bad. So it's usually not like, and now you're going to be punished. But I talked to Austrians and Bavarians who talk about the little tests they have to go through, and there's one of them I remember telling me how terrified he was because he knew the Krampuses were outside beyond the window, and he could hear their bells, and he said he couldn't focus during it. He was so terrified. And it's not, and so a lot of the fear is like, in America we kind of forget the Krampus wears bells, and a lot of folk figures of folk festivals wear bells. In Carnival they wear bells too. I have another book out about Carnival. So the bells are there just to kind of, for one thing, they kind of add an ambiance. You can hear them coming down the street, so that kind of builds the tension. And then they come in the house, and it's very loud once you get in the house, and they're clanging. And these are not like these are like big, like kind of industrial bells that now they're specially made. In the old days, they were just bells removed from the livestock. All of this tradition, you can really trace it to what the industry was in those regions. So they had goats and cattle that they'd raise, goats for the cheese, particularly. And so they're not out in the pasture grazing, so they had all the bells just sitting there. And so they would use those, and then they, tend to have some animal hides around, so then they have the fur. And then you're raising horned animals, so you've probably saved some horns from animals that you've butchered over the past or whatever, died. So all these things kind of came together. Originally, probably the Krampus was even more simple. They probably just smeared ash from the fireplace over their face so you couldn't recognize them. And then in the even earlier, so all the earlier Krampus masks are actually very simple. They're like probably early on they were just like burlap, or then in the teens and into the 19th century, they were like pasteboard, cardboard. So they're very simple. But then in the 30s, they took off and they started really making an art form of it, started carving these beautiful wooden masks that we know, and that all of the modern masks are kind of based on. So anyway, so that's the original form of the Krampus tradition. And then we have the Krampus runs that kind of grew out of that. But I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Yeah, so going back to that, first of all, I was gonna say I love getting crafty with costumes and things like that, so I would love to see some of your Krampus masks. So I feel like it's so cool that it's evolved that way, but I will say that, like, when you said the burlap mask or, like, cardboard ones, sometimes those are even
Yeah.
scarier because, like, when you look back at, like, the old Halloween photographs and
Yeah.
stuff, and the costumes were so simple, it might have been like a burlap kinda tied around with, like, holes in it, but it looks so scary.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
More
Yeah,
terrifying than anything we have now.
the whole what's funny is so the art of the Krampus mask kind of took off in the 20s and 30s. It's the whole tradition only goes back to maybe the late 17 it's so different. Really the early 1900s is or the late 1800s is when you have something that is like what we call Krampus. Um but the actual carved wooden mask, which became this beautiful art form, it grew. One of the artists that became really famous for it went to the art academy in Munich, and he was. Some people say that I had a friend who was a anthropology professor who showed some photos of the early of some of the classic old masks, meaning like 20s, 30s, 40s. To a colleague in his anthropology department, he thought they were African. So there's kind of the the way Picasso was borrowing from African art at that time too. So there's kind of like almost like an academic influence in what people see these wood masks and they think, oh, those are from the 1200s or something. It's from the early 1900s, and there is that influence. And then what's happened is because of American horror films, their masks are influenced by our horror films in a sense, and they call them horror masks or modern masks now. The ones that look a little more like movie monsters. The original masks look very folkloric and very kind of simple and stylized, but there's this cultural back and forth, and you don't see the the old burlap and cardboard masks anymore. Their early Krampus masks were actually really surprisingly like cheap and inexpensive. Kind of not particularly well made.
And when you said that they could hear the bells and then Krampus would come in, it sounded sort of like it was plural. Was there more than one? There's more than one Krampus?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The Krampus, usually the Nicholas has maybe 6, 8, 10, usually not that many Krampuses that come with him. And there's a funny thing. So so the Krampus is in southern Germany, and then in northern Germany they have another character. They call these dark, like kind of an anthropological term for them is dark companions. So in Alpine regions, the dark companion to the Saint Nicholas is Krampus. But in the north is Ruprecht. Knecht Ruprecht means like servant. Ruprecht. Ruprecht is kind of related to our name Robin, and there's even like Jacob Grimm thought it was related to Robin Goodfellow, who's a pagan character. But he is a single figure that comes. So you have the Nicholas and the Ruprecht. But Krampus is a herd animal. There's usually a pack of them that come with the Nicholas. So that's kind of the distinctive thing about the Krampus. Up in Holland, they have Black Peter, and they have Brother Foutard, Brother Whip in French and the Alsace and in France. So you have all these different characters, and it's the one that we seem to be fascinated by in America is the Krampus, which is just from Alpine regions.
That's so interesting because I kind of thought of it as there was St. Nicholas and then there was Krampus, kind of like the alter egos type thing. I thought there was like a singular one.
Yeah, and that's common. I think people think they don't so. And a weird thing when I speak, I talk about the Krampus, which seems weird to people because remember, the Krampus isn't like a first name, and the way to make this distinction in German is der Krampus. But the way I try to explain this to people is the word Krampus is like vampire. It's not Dracula. It's not a proper noun. It's a class of creatures. So he's not a singular figure. He's a kind of figure. He's a species, actually. So the Krampus come with Nicholas, and usually they travel in packs. It's very rare that you would have a Nicholas come with just one Krampus, at least in the in Krampus regions. It happens, but it's not common.
Okay, so then in the movie, I feel like I saw it a long time ago. is the Krampus a kind of more of a like a monster thing, like a Sasquatch almost type Bigfoot thing?
Well, I went on not the Art Bell show because it was after Art after Art Bell had stopped hosting, but I had somebody ask me about that too, and it's no, it's not really. It's not. He's not a cryptid. Nobody believes in the Krampus, and I don't think even if you go back to the beginnings of the tradition, maybe they thought there was some some devil out there that people obviously believed in devils, but the Krampus he's a theater. He's a theater role. He's a theater character in Germany. Excuse me, I'm getting over something myself. In Germany, they have a tradition of Stubenspiele, which means living room plays. And the Krampus and the Nicholas are characters in a little living room play. So everybody, the adults all knew. The kids might believe because, kids believe in these things. But it wasn't like the adults were like looking out the windows and afraid the Krampus is out there.
Okay, so nobody really little kids might believe in it, and you want the little kids to believe in it, but the adults all know this is a make-believe character, and, there's no thoughts of maybe, "Oh my gosh, there was a sighting of a Krampus the other day."
No.
Okay. But in the movie...
I think it's like any of these legends are people, imagine you're around the hearth and it's winter and there's spooky wind outside and you have not much to do because you're not doing any work on the farm. And people just told stories to entertain. So the Krampus was part of this kind of like homegrown grassroots theater and part of the storytelling. But I don't think people believe in it except for little kids because you want the little kid to believe in it. It's fun for them and enriches their childhood.
Yeah, it also makes them behave because Krampus might come get them.
Yeah.
And you said that with the kids, they would just kind of scare them. And then with the older kids, they would kind of attack them and like make them, show their dues or whatever. But what was the real repercussion that they were afraid of from Krampus? Was he going to, because I've seen like images where he's like carrying the kids away.
Yeah. So before you see from the 1700s already, there's Germany has like a great rich tradition of boogeyman characters. They're called Kindelschreckfiguren, which is a good long German word, child fear figures. So all of these figures that, trying to think what Americans have. If you don't go to sleep, the boogeyman or goblins. I don't know. Germans are more attached to these kinds of things. But you find these figures in all cultures they're created to keep kids from wandering in the grain fields, from getting too near water. So there's what creature that will drag you in the water if you go near the water. And so the Krampus is kind of just a seasonal version of any of these boogeyman characters. And as far as what he's going to do, one of the really old, I was just looking at some old print. It's from the 1700s of a figure just called the man with the sack. And so like the Krampus postcards later that kind of standardize what this Krampus does and what he looks like, it's kids stuffed in a sack. So the threat is he's going to carry you off in a sack. And, there's different stories of where you're going to. He's going to take you back. He's going to take you down to hell. He's going to take you to his cave and eat you. He's going to throw you in the sea. There are different versions, and that's kind of up to the storyteller, personal preferences, I think. But there's not a defined, one doom that awaits them all. But you don't want to go in the sack. Or you also see the baskets. Krampus. You see a lot of cards where he's wearing a basket, and that's kind of It's another way agrarian workers would carry stuff on their back. So it's kind of, again, it's borrowed from what their just day-to-day life. But the look kind of looks like a laundry hamper for Americans. But the sack is one of the oldest things. So he carries them off. We don't know where. It's not good.
Okay. All right. So watch out for him. And so you said Krampus Day is actually the 6th or like the night before on the 5th?
Yeah. And sorry. Yeah, it's Nicholas Abend. That's when he comes. in some regions, like the one evening, the evening is for the families. Oh, I think where I went, the Bad Gastein near Salzburg, south of Salzburg, is one of the most traditional areas. And there, for instance, they have the evening is for these Krampus groups visiting the homes. And then on the 6th, so that's the night of the 5th, and then on the 6th, they would have like a kind of more of a parade through the town, and that's more for the families and older kids, and it's less about the home visit. So that's the Krampuslauf, which is what Americans have been imitating, the little parades, processions. And those grew out of those grew out of the tradition of the first tradition, the original tradition of them visiting homes. So you have these groups, multiple Nicholases and Krampuses, crossing, going this way and that through the town, and people would come out to look at them and throw snowballs at them and get teased and chase them and taunt them. So the procession itself became kind of a civic event where you gathered all the different troops. There's different. You kind of have your neighborhood Nicholas and Krampus, and who's related to your family. So there's different groups in a town. Like every 30 families has a group or something like that. They might visit X 30 say houses at a time, and it depends how that's also died out because the way cities are structured now, people don't live. It's more like everybody's in an apartment building, so it doesn't really work the same way. But that's the original. The home visits, Hausbesucher, is the original form, home visit.
Kind of reminds me of the way Mardi Gras or New Orleans does the parades too. They have crews and there's different floats, and there's people that are like kind of a group that decorate those floats and are on those floats.
Yeah, and from my carnival book, I also noticed the same sort of pattern. What happens is you have some of these undomesticated traditions where people get a little crazy and a little wild. And then the city decides this is getting a little unruly. We need to do something. So they start offering prizes for the best costumes, the best float. And then it kind of gets all channeled into that. You don't have all these people out at night doing maybe crazy stuff. The Krampus tradition itself was never that rowdy, because you had the St. Nicholas figure who was kind of a chaperone. He was the good guy. But some of the earlier traditions that it drew from, Persian traditions, were more mischievous and more like kind of what we think of as, early Halloween with tricks, not treats really. Well, some treats might be involved. But yeah, there's the night visits could get kind of unruly. So what you want to do is channel it all down through Main Street and give prizes and make sure everybody's kind of on the same page.
So tell me about the LA Krampus Fest. How did this start? Where does it happen? How many people are involved? All the details.
Well, I was working on my book. I had become fascinated with the Krampus in the mid 2000s. That's when the Krampus images started appearing online, kind of. And as an American, I would see those. And I started reading more and more. I had actually seen Krampus images many, many years ago when I was in college. I had spent a year in Berlin, which isn't really Krampus country, but I saw these wonderful devil postcards around Christmas, and I remember buying one without really knowing what it was. Would have been back in the 80s, actually. But many years later, I saw what Europeans were doing with the Krampus costumes, and like I was saying earlier, as somebody who likes to make, I like to sculpt and make costumes and so forth, I got kind of fascinated with the idea of making the masks, but I hadn't really, committed to any of that. First, I think the book came first. Before everything became me going to Austria and going to this area, the Gastein Valley, and seeing some of the really traditional activities. And I remember emailing a friend when I got home. I remember coming in and I still had snow on my jacket, and I was like, "We got to do this in LA." So it kind of grew out. There's a documentary out this week about it. Actually, just there's an article in the Wall Street Journal, something called SantaCon, which is a bunch of people dressed in. You know about that, yeah?
I was going to ask you about SantaCon because I was in New York last year and it was SantaCon, and I did not know. But There are thousands of people dressed like Santa, and it's a pub crawl.
Yeah, it's there was I don't know if the hate has died down. It was definitely became very unpopular, but in the 2000s, early 2000s. No, I'm sorry. We started doing it in the late 90s in LA, and I had stopped doing it by the early 2000s, but it just had a life of its own. That was with the group called the Cacophony Society, which also started the Burning Man Festival.
I want to ask you about that too.
So I had friends who who had done SantaCon, but we also had gotten a little turned off by it. And I think some of the folks they really liked the challenge of making a Krampus suit, but also doing something that's out in the city in a little guerrilla style, a little startling and, surprising. And it is much more so in LA than it would be in Austria or Bavaria. So, I think it was a bunch of people who, on the edges of LA's production community who wanted to make suits. And then now we had a long break for COVID, and then our venue that we were using closed down. We used to do a kind of a little parade. It was only like a block we had reserved downtown, but I don't. Downtown LA is a little out of control right now.
Yeah.
So we're in downtown still, but we're at a brewery called Benny Boy's Brewing, which is nice. It feels very German to be at a brewery. So that's kind of our main event. We do 3 nights there, and we have musical performances that are it's kind of like Oktoberfest meets Halloween meets Christmas. So we have traditional kind of German music, and we have a Christmas kind of a Christmas market with vendors, and then at the end, all the Krampuses come out and attack people, and there's photos, and so it's it is Halloween, Christmas, and Oktoberfest is kind of compact all the seasons. So we have that 3 nights on December 5th, 6th, and 7th, and then I do what I'm doing here a little more. I do a lecture at a place in LA called the Philosophical Research Society. We've done stuff there for quite a few years, and we have live Krampuses there too to take your photo and get swatted. And there's also mulled wine there, which is very popular and very much part of the Krampus tradition. So we have those 4 different nights. What we do in LA. And
I love
if anybody
it.
wants to know, if anybody's in the area wants to go or nearby wants to go, it's just type in Krampus Los Angeles and you'll find what's going on.
Okay, back to the Santa cons. Not only was I in New York, and I didn't even realize they had that big one with like the pub crawl and everything. Kind of takes up the whole like lower. It sounds like they were like, stay away. There's barfing. There's like, it's drama. And so, but like I know in Vegas, they have a huge Santa like run. Everybody's dressed like Santa. There's like thousands of people like do like a walk or a run or something.
All kind of mutually inspired. They're all kind of related to this thing. It started in San Francisco in the late 80s, and then LA did it next, and then Portland, we did it, and then it just started spreading. A friend of mine, they had a sort of symbolic one at some research station at the South Pole. A friend of mine went to Japan. It's definitely all over the world, but I don't know what the documentary is called, but there is a documentary that just came out. It's at a festival in New York right now, and maybe it'll be in LA. But about this phenomenon. But so we grew out of that. We just wanted to freshen it up and do something more our own, and not just the problem with the SantaCon. I think for a lot of us was it felt stale and also kind of it was you buy your ticket and take the ride. It was like everybody just kind of on the same page. Well, the Krampus stuff was more, it felt a little more individualistic, I think, to people who participated. The idea of the Santa thing was to disappear in the crowd, which is fun, you get away with it for. But I think people wanted to, make their own Krampus identity with their own suit. There's also something now called Krampus America. It's a convention that I went to. It was up near Seattle this year, and my God, I had no idea what we started or what we were in on from the people. It's like they have their own Krampus persona, and people are like Krampus all year. I mean, I kind of just do it at the end of the year. But Yeah. So I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, as far as like having a Krampus personality or being very individualistic and unique, that's become another sort of form of self-expression, I guess, which is,
Yeah. Well, I love the idea of designing your own Krampus costume and having kind of like your own identity and your own like look and everything based on the original Krampus ideas, but making it your own.
yeah. Um, people have fun. Yeah. Like I think I was starting to say, a lot of the people in our troupe have started. A lot of people across the country are buying suits from Europe too, which are very expensive,
Ooh,
especially when you get into the shipping. But
yeah.
I'm kind of happy that it's taken. People are taking it so seriously. There, it's quite an investment. I don't even have a European Krampus mask myself. I had made masks. I did like resin masks that I sculpted and cast for a while, but I don't play the Krampus anymore. So I'm a little old and glasses under the mask don't work very well. So in the
Oh.
beginning I did, but I supervise now.
Okay. Well, I feel like it is definitely catching on here. Like I just said at the beginning too, I was invited to a Krampus tea party in Orange County like 2 years ago, and I decorated my horns and did a whole outfit for it. And like we mentioned already too, there is that horror movie here about it, and I've seen it on Christmas cards. And I just think that it is catching on. And I
Yeah.
was curious why you thought like the spooky resonates with people even at Christmas time.
Well, I think there's a lot of different reasons depending on, who you are. I think part of why he caught on was distinctly distinctly American. So the funny thing is, in Europe, the Krampus is very traditional. He's not in America. He's like counterculture, but
Yeah.
in Europe, he's in fact. I have an Austrian friend. He hates the Krampus stuff because it's all what these traditional people do, and he considers himself much too progressive to be involved in such things. But in America, it became sort of I think people understood it as kind of an anti-Christmas thing, which I wish hadn't happened. I don't see it like that myself, and it's not true to the tradition, but I think that is the appeal. It was kind of like, we're going to still have Christmas, we're going to have a punk rock Christmas somehow. And I think that was a lot of it. I mean, I remember when I first saw the images of the Krampus like beating kids, and it's Christmas and he's beating kids, and it was like, whoa, this is pretty weird. So I think just the the shock of the new the novelty of it was very, and naughtiness. It's like culturally, we think of a Christmas as a time when we like protect kids. We inherited a very kind of family oriented, sentimental idea of Christmas. That's not the history of Christmas traditions, which I also know something about. But ever since the late 1800s, mid 1800s, it's been a very kind of quiet home and family time. And I think what happened with the Krampus is it became kind of a rowdy single people out on the streets time, which is what it originally was. There were, the idea of having rowdies on the streets on Christmas was part of the culture in America in the 1800s and definitely in Europe too. And the Krampus was part of that. So I think people like the idea of being kind of having a different kind of Christmas, but they also want a tradition to celebrate every year. People like to come back. I have so many people that are like, every year we do this. And it's like, it's obviously like a little bit of a sentimental tradition for you too. So it's like
Yeah.
this weird combination of like, I'm rebellious, but I also have this tradition I do every year. So I think it satisfies both sides of some people's personalities.
I think some people too look at Christmas and get very depressed around that time. And whether or not you have family or not,
Yeah.
maybe sometimes you don't always get along with your family or you're dreading having to spend that time with your family. And it's kind of a way to express yourself as like, I'm doing this, but I'm doing it my way kind of thing. Or I don't know. I can kind of feel that because like there was a time back when I was like a teenager and stuff where I was like, I don't want to go do Christmas with my family. Like I want to be with my friends or whatever. And I would have totally have just eaten up the whole Krampus thing.
Yeah. I am encouraging silly teenage sentiments. I will never be forgiven for this.
Okay. talking about Santa for a second and scariness, I always, and maybe I'm weird, but I was always kind of afraid of Santa Claus. I know he's portrayed as very sweet and brings gifts and everything, but it always freaked me out a little bit that this man, strange old man, was coming in our house at night while we were sleeping. And I didn't like this idea that much. Yes, he could leave the gifts. And then also, we did not have a fireplace. So I was very confused how this works because he obviously, as we all know, he comes down the fireplace, right? Right through the chimney. And like, how is he doing this then? So I was very skeptical, very worried about this man coming. I didn't want to go to sleep because I was worried about falling asleep and him coming. But at the same time, I didn't want to be caught seeing him either. So it was a very kind of like anxiety that night. And I also speculated that this is all a lie and it's my parents, but just in case it's not, this is very worrisome.
Yeah. I and you also have the elves spying on you before that, or Santa spying,
That's true.
which is what, some of the Krampus, there were plays that were written actually also talk about Krampus spying on the children during the year. Um, I'm a, I was a horror kid, so I grew up liking everything horror. So I'm maybe not the right person to answer this because, but for me, I talk about this in my book. My book is called The Krampus and the Old Dark Christmas. And the idea that winter is a time when we kind of indulge our fantasies about the supernatural seems very fitting to me. Traditionally, like, you don't have work to do so much if you're the old agricultural society, so you're all, again, by the fireplace and telling stories and making props for your Krampus play. But I think it's like our imaginations go a little crazy at night. We have more, I feel like the imagination is freed at night. I think during the winter, when the sun is kind of dying, you have shorter days, I think the imagination has more freedom. And I think for me, the idea that there's something supernatural happening in winter seems it's something it appeals to me, and I feel like it was the same. I'm feeling the same thing that people, back in the 16, 17, 18, 1900s also felt. I feel like it's kind of fun to let your imagination run a little wild and maybe scare yourself a little. And so the fact that you're finding Santa scary, yeah, it's scary. I mean, you've just explained why it's scary. It shouldn't be like that. But it's kind of this intrusion of the supernatural in our mundane lives. And our culture has kind of discarded religion, but we still have that kind of story. And I think that horror movies are also related to the we want the supernatural to intrude in our boring, mundane lives. And I think so winter is the time, and that's why we have the Victorian ghost stories too, right? It's a time for storytelling, time for spooky stories and letting the imagination get unchained and go a little crazy. So I think Santa being scary I think that was kind of always part of the plan, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Because I mean, I too grew up loving horror and stuff. So you would think I'd be right down the alley, but I feel like a real man, which we're supposed to think he is in a way, coming into the house is scarier than any horror movie or ghost or.
Movie,
Well,
you better watch out.
yeah, I'm like, why are my parents okay with this? Like, why is this? um, but then I also wait. I was gonna say another thing about that too. I kind of felt that way with like the Easter Bunny as well, like coming in
Yeah.
the house and hiding the Tooth Fairy. Like, ew, how does he get that money out from under my pillow while I'm sleeping? That means he's right there next to me, and I'm so scared of that. Like,
And
yikes!
it stimulates your imagination. It sort of sets up a challenge for the young mind, I think. Again,
I
I'm a horror kid, so I kind of liked wondering about these weird things and trying to fit them into my normal reality.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely thought about them and I definitely imagined what they would look like. And then if you've seen any of the horror movies with the Tooth Fairy in them now, I mean, it's way scarier than I imagined it being. I was trying to think of like a cute little fairy that comes in and like, this is not what they make him look like. Okay, you mentioned it earlier. Tell me what the Cacophony Society is, because I think I might be a member without even knowing.
That was our. Did you say that was our slogan? Actually, you may.
I read that.
Remember, yeah. Because the Cacophony Society was a society without any actual membership. Nobody was either a member or not a member. It was kind of all in how you viewed yourself. So the idea of the Cacophony Society was to seek out, there's another phrase that was used often was experiences beyond the mainstream. So they kind of fell into, it started in San Francisco, and then I started the second group in Los Angeles. And again, it's like the SantaCon, because SantaCon grew out of that. It was up in Portland and Seattle, and then it's kind of a group in New York for a while, but not too much. But so the activities fell into a few different categories. We had, I call them field trips to the fringe, where we would, LA is really rich in these sorts of things. We go visit like, some strange cult headquarters and just let them show us around. There's still there, I think. The Aetherius Society is like a saucer cult that we went to several times. And so they're like, why do you keep coming back here? And we'd also just go to like outsider art sites. Somebody made a bunch of, out in the desert, makes a bunch of art out of license plates or old bottles or something. So stuff kind of that was like, who are these people that did their, march to their own drum? And then we had, the challenging events were more like guerrilla theater, where people would dress up and just go out in public and see what happened. And I guess that probably grew out of the San Francisco like mime tradition, the culture of performing with the public, and that's like how the SantaCon thing came about. And in LA, we had I ran it in LA for like 10 years, and I think we had a couple of different versions. The versions of that we dressed as clowns and went out in public as clowns quite a bit. And then we had dressed as dogs. At some point, the person who led the clown group wanted to dress as dogs, so we switched over to dogs, which is just terrible, crappy costumes.
Wait, I have a question about the clown thing. Do you remember when it came out and there were people doing like rogue clown dressing up? And
yeah,
people were freaking out?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we were doing this long before that, but unless you mean the book, I don't know when the book came out.
No, this was the movie.
Oh, but there are also lots of urban legends about clowns. And I think the thing with urban legends, this is kind of what my podcast is about: folklore and legends and mythology in general, not just the Krampus or the old stuff, but urban legends have this thing where people, I think all folklore and legend does. We just talked about this with the Krampus. Someone tells a story and they present it as true, and then somebody else tells the same story and said it is true. So you have this kind of feedback loop between fiction and reality, and something that starts as a story becomes reality. And I think what happened, the evil clown thing, there was, I think it was in the early 2000s, there was like a rash of clowns appearing in graveyards and along highways and stuff. And I think people realized, my group would have been, we were suspect in this kind of thing, but people would just think, what's going to scare people? I'm going to feed this urban legend, and so you kind of have fun, and in a sense, that's what the Krampus does. Or even Santa Claus tradition. It's like you take a legend and you kind of enact it, you embody it, and then it seems real to children, and only children believe it's real, but. In other cases, like with the clowns, people are taking photographs of these clowns sighted along a highway and like sharing them online, and everybody's like, what's going on? So they're different audiences, but the idea, this kind of cycle between reality, acting, theater, and legend is kind of like, it's still active. And it's not like it's a clown thing. It's not as formalized with the, Krampus is a tradition. It's kind of locked in. But yeah, there was like a whole spate of clown sightings, in I think the mid 2000s that I remember being very excited about. I think I'd stopped doing the Cacophony stuff, but I was like, oh, I'm glad somebody else is doing that sort of thing.
That's funny. Tell me how the Cacophony Society is related to Burning Man, or is the instigator for Burning Man, right? Like started it or something?
Yeah. My friends in San Francisco who started the Cacophony Society, particularly John Law, is he's featured in the SantaCon documentary, I know too. There are three people that started Burning Man. One of them is Larry Harvey, who died recently. And then another is Michael, aka Danger Ranger, and then John Law. So the two left were actually they were Cacophony Society members. And the first Burning Man took place in San Francisco on Baker Beach. It was much smaller. And they just like realized that, well, they didn't know how they're going to get along with the police. So they moved it out into the desert. So then it got bigger and bigger. And now it's like a lot of things Cacophony starts, it's unrecognizable to the people that started it. So now it's like a giant rave in the desert. But originally it was, when I went out there in the early 90s, there was like 300, 400 people maybe at most. And now I don't know how many thousands there are, but it just got moved out to the desert because Nevada was a free, kind of very free wheeling with how it deals with pyro and other stuff.
Right. And so the Cacophony Society is kind of responsible for things like flash mobs, like you said. That
I was looking for, yes. I think it was in the zeitgeist. It just kind of grew up at the same time. But yes, we did what would have been called a flash mob, but it wasn't really because the Cacophony Society had kind of the Cacophony Society. Poetically, I could say it's still out there, but really it kind of died out by the time the internet. I don't know how it would have. Things are very different with internet culture now, so I don't know what would have happened. But the flash mob, because it relied on the internet to kind of popularize it, we were just kind of passing the baton or something, I guess, by the time people started communicating on the internet. But yes, flash mob is like a more modern version, although I don't think those happen anymore, of what we were doing.
Yeah, and then like urban exploration, which you kind of mentioned, like going out to places, like you said, like the cult leaders and stuff, which would be...
Especially, we didn't do as much of it, but in San Francisco, they would climb the bridges and also going down into the storm drains. We did that in LA too, but it was very much one of the traditional events. So yeah, urban exploration or abandoned buildings, we left that out. That was like another kind of main kind of subcategory of what we would do.
I see. That's so cool to me. Like, they said that the sewers in Oakland, I don't know if I need to do that one, but like,
drains, they're not really, it's like water, but yeah.
But like abandoned buildings and things like that, like I'm into that kind of thing. I love exploring that kind of thing. And then there was something in here too called culture jamming.
Yeah, that's a 90s term that got kind of lost, I think. That that just meant, so I guess an example of that would be, and again, my friend John Law would do, they would creep up at night and modify billboards, like take paste and paper and kind of have another design they would put up instead. So that's like one example of that. I mean, I think culture jamming kind of generally could be any kind of taking, and the SantaCon thing is that in a sense. It would take like this trope of Santa Claus, the benevolent patron of families and good kids, and they make him naughty. So that would be culture jamming too.
Okay.
That's what we did back then.
Well, I love all this weird stuff. How much of it borders on illegal?
Especially with, I don't know because, a lot of it would, I guess. I got kicked off a plane a couple of times for making, everything is so different now.
Wait, what'd you say? You got kicked off a plane?
Yeah, for instance, I don't know. I made a joke about bringing dynamite on a plane, which you don't do now. It's very different, but that was we were flying up to LA. People were flying up to Portland for the SantaCon. And, just all sorts of stuff. We could have gotten in trouble. We only had, San Francisco had some arrests. I think they were just held. I don't know. I guess somebody was charged. The funniest thing is we went dressed as it wasn't exactly an arrest, but we went dressed as clowns to a bluegrass music festival or something out in Topanga. And it was it was at an Old West movie ranch, which the people not in Southern California maybe don't know, but it's like, where they would shoot the old Westerns. And it's like, it used to be a ranch. Now it's just rented out. And that's what they had, all the old buildings. They were playing banjo and stuff around. For some reason, we chose that to go dressed as clowns. And we were a little rowdy, and the park rangers were patrolling. And so one of the clowns was thrown in the movie jail, the Old West jail, and detained, which I guess functioned as a jail sort of for the park ranger. But that's the only arrest we had. Usually, I wasn't invested in getting arrested for, I wasn't an activist, or there was no reason to be arrested. So we kind of move on when we saw things are getting a little tense. But That was
Yeah.
the one pseudo arrest we had.
One of the things I thought was interesting in your biography is that you write for or have written for Atlas Obscura, and I don't go anywhere without checking that first to see like what's
Yeah.
weird and crazy that I can go visit wherever I'm going.
Yeah, it's a great resource. Yeah. I haven't written for it for a while, but it's definitely like, it's really more universal than it used to be. Even I agree. I would check it before I go somewhere too.
What places have you written on, or what contributions have you made to it?
Oh, I did a lecture on the Krampus for the LA Atlas Obscura group. I think is maybe why that's in there. I think, I was, yeah, that's the main thing. I was talking to them about, because I also have a book about weird food, and I talked to them about maybe the culinary thing, but I didn't end up doing that.
I have that in here too. Tell me about the weird food, because I am like such a particular eater. My husband says I eat like a 6-year-old. Like if it's not
French
chicken
fries,
nuggets and macaroni and cheese, forget it. But tell me about this weird food.
that book was like ancient history for me. It was like I'd love to sell more, I guess, but it's like, that was a work on somebody approached me to write it. It wasn't really near and dear to my heart. And in fact, I feel it was weird because I wrote that book before, just as kind of the foodie movement was coming into fruition. And it was kind of like, I don't feel like it ever fit. I never wrote that book, but yes, Offbeat Food Adventures in an Omnivorous World, written for Santa Monica Press for some reason.
Yeah.
Not one of my good big sellers, I don't think, but I did write a book about food.
Well, you also were interviewed for Halloween Nation Behind the Scenes of America's Fright Night. Tell me about that and what that book is about and what your interview was about.
Oh, you're picking up all the details in my bio. I need to take some of those out. I'm actually let me just back up a tiny bit. The Krampus book that I've written ended up being part of a 4-book seasonal set. So the last book that came out about Carnival is like the late winter, early spring book. I'm going to do a spring and summer, and I have yet a fall book where I'm going to talk about Halloween. And I've done quite a few like this just this last year at my podcast, Bone and Sickle. I did something all about the history of using pumpkins and turnips and jack-o'-lanterns, pumpkins and turnips as jack-o'-lanterns. So I have been delving into taking little pot shots at the history of Halloween. At the time, I think as I recall, I was interviewed because, again, with the Cacophony Society, we had done I think that was in one of her later chapters about what's the modern Halloween like. And we had done a haunted house maze kind of thing, but it was very, very strange, very, very different. It was scary. There were rooms that were not traditional horror rooms at all, but also horrifying, I think. There was a room where homeless people tried to sell you their hair, for instance. And there was another room with a giant head with zits that exploded. So it was very edgy, I guess, or avant-garde for your usual Halloween experience. I think that's why I was in there. I'm not sure. But I think I talked about, we did that several years. We did just different crazy haunted house ideas. Somebody would have an idea. What's repulsive and creepy and scary to you? Let's do it. And people would pay and walk through and leave. We had somebody had some kind of flashback. We had like a war veteran had a flashback and grabbed somebody and swung her around in circles. And yeah, it got kind of crazy. We had a naked guy that freaked people out. Yeah, it was very edgy. I kind of just remembering now what all we did, but it was we just called it the Museum of Mental Decay. We did it several years, I think 3 years, but that was a time and a place.
I've always wanted to have my own like haunted house, or design like my own area in a haunted house or room of a haunted house, or like whatever. I sketched one all out and everything. Like I know exactly where the maze actors would be, and like the whole works. Like I want to do it.
Too. I wanted to move into a house and turn it into a haunted house. At some point, I was looking. My wife and I were looking at a house in Pennsylvania that would be perfect, but we didn't end up moving. But yeah, I think we all. My house is small and not quite suitable for a haunted house, but I've done what I can.
Yeah. It would be so fun to do that to a personal home too. Like
Yeah.
I actually had a meeting too. Do you remember the Georgian Hotel? Well, it's still there. The Georgian Hotel on in Santa Monica, like right on the PCH there. Like it's
Oh,
looks straight
not,
across the ocean. It's very
I
Art
don't think.
Deco.
Oh, okay. So it sounds vaguely familiar.
Well, it
So
was for sale a while back ago, and I was talking to a group of people that I thought could be my investors about buying it and making it into a haunted hotel. Like you go there and you're going to have an experience. Like it had ghost stories to it
yeah,
already, but like we're going to make sure that everybody has an experience. And you can elect to turn it off if you want,
yeah.
but we were going to have things go bump in the night. Like really.
I remember there's a property that I at some point I was working on a book about Southern California cults, but I never ended up selling the idea. We didn't end up doing it. I didn't end up doing it, but there was a cult out in uh, uh, kind of where the Manson family was actually, Box Canyon. That was called
Yeah.
Manson. He actually visited this cult. The cult was from the 40s, and it's called Fountain of the World. And it was like an early New Age cult, kind of borrowed from Asian philosophy, but the cult ended in the before the it, well, it kind of peaked in the 50s when the leader blew himself up with dynamite. So, and then it was kind of like people still were staying in kind of in what was left of it for into the 60s and 70s. But I saw it went on Zillow, and I was so like, and it wasn't, I was like, oh, I would love to have it. Cause kind of some of it, because that area, Santa Susana Canyon, there's lots of caves and stuff. And it was it was that kind of crazy hippie architecture. Let's build this into the cave and build this here. Very like, we have a lot of that in Topanga Canyon too, but that was like my fantasy. I want to buy that or rent it at least. And yeah, LA has so much crazy, interesting property and so many great stories.
It does. And every once in a while, like you said, they come up for sale. Like I love like the old Hollywood.
Yeah,
Like recently I just saw that the guy who played Tarzan, his home is
Johnny
still
Weissmuller.
yes. Yes, his home it's like in a state of decay, but there was like a lazy river, like and it's still
Oh wow,
there.
probably a big pool, right?
Yes, with the
'Cause he
lazy
was
river
like
and
a
stuff.
swimming athlete, aquatic athlete, I think.
And it's in Bel Air, and it's just like a decrepit property. Like, I wish I could just buy it and like bring it back to its old glory. Like that'd be so amazing.
Yeah, we have unfortunately, a lot of stuff just gets bulldozed and pulled down and bought for something else. But I mean, LA has a great history. It's not a very really long history, but we kind of shaped people's dreams for many decades. Yeah, I wish we had a little more consciousness of history here than we do, but there's market forces and it's
It's so
expensive.
bad. They love to tear everything down, like the Pink Palace, like Jay Mandeville's house, like the heart-shaped pool and her pink bathroom with the shag carpet. Like, no, you have to keep those things.
Memories.
I know, it's so sad. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me. Tell everybody listening how they can listen to your podcast, um, follow you on social media, buy your books, all that good stuff.
For social media, just look for Al Ridenour. I guess that's going to be on your website. Or the podcast is called Bone and Sickle. I spell out and I don't use the little cute ampersand. And so it's boneandsickle.com is the website. You can stream it anywhere, any streamer. And my book is The Krampus and the Old Dark Christmas. If you just put the Krampus, that'll probably come up because I'm the only person that says the Krampus. That's one of my books. Get that anywhere you get a book, any books. And then also the new book, which you didn't talk about much, was it's called A Season of Madness. And that kind of grew out of my Krampus research because I kept seeing, when I was researching Krampus, I kept seeing all these other like kind of crazy animal costumes. And then I realized, oh, those aren't part of this tradition. These belong in the carnival season. So early, like later in winter, and from other parts of the world, but also from Germany and Austria. So a season of madness is the Fools, Monsters, and Marvels of the Old World Carnival. And it's also has lots of photos like the Krampus book. And also, I will say, I didn't talk too much about my podcast, but I want to say that it's kind of like I use actual historical texts, and we quote directly from those, but it's also like a radio play where there's sound effects and music. So it's not like a talk show, or it's so much work. I wish I had never started. No, I'm happy I did, but it's kind of like theater of the mind, you know, the sound effects and kind of mood ambiance and so forth. So I try to make it entertaining. This is why there's only one a month, but they're long too. So I'd love for people to, check out the podcast, and the books are on Amazon or wherever.
Yeah.
And if you're interested in the Krampus stuff, Krampus Los Angeles, if you're in the area, that's what we're doing.
I love the idea of the sound effects and all that kind of stuff. I don't have enough edit skills to do all that, but I would love to tell like Victorian ghost stories with all like the creaky door sound or like the nails or like different sound effects. That'd be so amazing. I'm sure it's incredible. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Ghost Bunny Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me on my spooky adventures, and I look forward to sharing a new ghost story with you each week. Please subscribe to my podcast so you're always the first to know when a new episode is out, and follow me on social media at Ghost Bunny Podcast on Instagram, at Ghost Bunny Podcast on YouTube, and at Bridget Marquardt on Instagram as well. Thank you guys, and have a very Merry Christmas.
Bye-bye.